It is over.
This is Kyle Scarborough, Cult of Wyndham. You're listening to the Insiders Podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to the Insiders Podcast, and we have got a real treat for you guys. We are talking tonight to Kyle Scarborough. Kyle, welcome to the show. We really appreciate you giving us some time today and are super, super excited to talk to you. Thanks for coming on.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for supporting.
Anytime, man, anytime. So the first thing I've got to get started with right off the bat is you have been, obviously you're on Twitter. We have seen so much of your artwork. I love the artwork that you do. Everything that you've got out there is absolutely amazing. So what got you started in that field? What got you started doing art? When did you start that kind of stuff?
Easy answer is I've been drawing all my life. That's just been something been with me since I was a kid and kind of continued on. After school, after high school, I had a scholarship to college for art, and ultimately left that. College and I didn't get along. From there, I kept the business going. I kept freelance work going as much as I could, but I had to keep the 9 to 5 like everyone else. And it was really when I came across, came across tattooing. Tattooing's always been there, but I never really recognized it as a real viable career path. I think it took exposure to a lot of artists around, but very few in America, it seemed like at the time, give it 12, 15 years ago, that did things that really grabbed my attention. There's a lot of great artists, not to take anything away, but people who were doing things like photorealism or things that had just an incredible amount of realistic textures to it, or anything that it blew my mind. I thought, to transfer something that looks like it came off the page of a comic book or out of a movie or out of a horror film, and be able to put that on skin. I thought, well, I want to know how to do that. So that prompted the desire to keep continuing that way. And really what it just allowed me to do was just say that my career, my job is a hobby. It's my passion. It's what I do. So I'm fortunate in that regard, and been doing that now for, like I said, it's been over 12 years. I say 12 and a half, give or take. My math is terrible. But it's always been there. And outside of tattooing, I was always an artist first, as far as on paper, illustrations, and so forth, and continued on, and that's where we're at.
That's amazing. That's awesome, man. Do you have I know, I've seen a lot of, especially on your social media, you do a lot of horror stuff. So I got to ask you, because again, we talk about this so much, and it's so funny that the people who are fans of Bray, and we'll get to him a little bit later, but the people who are fans of this whole thing, most of them are horror fans. And I think that's amazing. I'm a huge horror fan. I know my co-host Jeff is as well, and Jody is also. So did you always love the horror genre?
Always. I have a memory. Let's see. I'm 30. I was born in 81, so I want to say this was not too long after Friday. Gosh, it was still in the 80s. I want to say it was 89 or so. I remember being at Christmas with a Nightmare on Elm Street sweatshirt on.
That's
awesome. My mom, we have a very tight-knit family. It's pretty blue collar, pretty straightforward across the board. Nothing really sticks out. My father is a retired fireman. My mom is a stay-at-home mom. The main 3 boys. We had a pretty standard, lower middle class suburban upbringing. And yet my mom and her mom, who my grandmother is still with us, I think she's now 93, absolutely is obsessed with The Walking Dead. They love B horror movies. I was allowed to watch The Shining at like 7. That messed me up. Yeah, that's definitely been a part of it. It's always just been what draws you. And I think you come across most people and say, when it comes to the good guy versus bad guy, the bad guys always look cooler. They always had better outfits. They always had better lines. So it was, you always kind of gravitated towards that. And it's always stuck. And, so yeah, I have a huge soft spot, and have my favorites and so forth. But absolutely, horror in that genre has always been it since I was young.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I totally can side with you there. I've been, and I think like you with The Shining, I had watched The Exorcist when I was very young. And you want to talk about messing you up? Yeah, I could totally get you. And
God bless you, Joe. God bless
my
you.
goodness. and I've been a horror fan ever since. And yeah, so that's awesome. I think I actually tweeted you, and you were kind enough to respond I requested a Friday the 13th art from you on Friday the 13th, and you actually tweeted it back. So that was pretty amazing. You kind of made my day.
That messed me up too. I went back through my Instagram. I knew I drew one, and I went back to my Instagram, couldn't find it, and I was like, "Well, something's being funky. All my images are disappearing off my phone and so forth." But I knew I had that saved in my talent. Yeah, because I did a little run. I had it was a Freddy I did, and I did a Leatherface and whatnot. I was just kind of doodling around your famous slasher villains, and yeah, I knew I had one. So
that was awesome. Yeah, it made my day, man. I absolutely am a Jason Voorhees nut.
Very cool.
So that's awesome, man. That's awesome.
So Kyle, you talked about the horror genre. What are some of your favorite horror movies?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. How am I supposed to?
I know.
I can't give one. I think if I had to really just give a heartfelt answer to that, just the easy answer that I know I'll always be confident with, I can't pick between them. But I think it really comes down to The Shining. I watched that at least once. I mean, my wife and I will definitely put that on, and Halloween, and probably sometime during the summer. Like, you just want to watch The Shining and just ruin our night. So we'll put that on. Well, also pleasantly surprised too by how pretty solid that Doctor Sleep sequel was. I was pretty impressed with that. I
love that movie.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting for it to be rough, and there were moments where I thought, I didn't love everything, but all in all, I was pretty good. But that and the original Texas Chainsaw. I can smell that movie. There's something about that when I watch it, it reminds me so much of. We take these little trips, family reunions, whatnot. Well, in my opinion, we're driving in the middle of God's nowhere. It turns out we were driving like an hour. But when you're a kid, it's just, you might as well, you're leaving the planet. And we're just out in the middle of the country. And at the time, we grew up in St. Louis. So we're out just in the middle of, ironically, around where I live now. So here I am making fun of it. But, you drive out, it's hot, it's muggy, and everything is sticky. And we used to be in this one little house. And this house my mom's family had, in the middle of this field, and the thing had no AC in it, and a lot of family members and people extended family, people I didn't know. So it was very off-putting, very, very kind of odd faces. When you start getting you know what I'm talking about. When you start getting extended family, it gets a little bizarre.
Oh, yeah.
So you're in this hot, muggy, dank little mobile trailer thing, and all this like picnic food, and the food has a smell to it, and it's so hot. So when I watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that's what I mean by I can feel the stickiness. The movie feels real. It still feels very documentary in that, which was, of course, their goal. And to me, it succeeds. Other things have tried since then. They failed. That one still holds true. That one, that has a soft spot. So, I mean, there's so many. But if I had to pick, I can give you two, and that would be those two.
Awesome.
Love it, man. That's we all have. It's funny how the different answers that we get to that question, and we've been able to ask so many people about that. But yeah, Texas Chainsaw, it still resonates today. I mean, the movie's what, 1974, I believe.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's just one of those classic films like 78 Halloween that you can just watch over and over, and they're still scary.
Yep, absolutely.
Love it.
I'm with you, Joe. I watched the episode too young, and so that's always going to be my number one favorite horror movie. I actually got to meet Linda Blair a few years ago.
I heard she's pretty cool in some conventions. I've never met her, but yeah, that movie just absolutely freaked me out. I will not watch the remake because I will not watch that whole spider walk thing. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Nope. So
she autographed my copy of The Exorcist and wrote "Sweet Dreams" in it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So Kyle, when did you? So I mean, we're gonna get into your meeting Bray. When did you guys meet?
It's kind of drug out now. My dates are terrible. I'm sure I could go back and track it all down through Twitter. Long story short, kind of started with, and like you guys too, and I can say this confidently, he's the reason that got me kind of back into, I'd say wrestling, but especially with the WWE. I've always kind of paid attention, even when I was kind of falling out of fandom a bit. There's lulls in those moments and whatnot. You kind of get a little bored with it. I hit the peak along with a lot of people with the Attitude Era stuff, and then I guess we now call it the ruthless aggression. I didn't know that was a thing. but when we started calling it that. So that early 2000 stuff is when I kind of stopped following too much. And I'd say for about the next decade, I saw what was going on. I could tell you some names here and there, but I wasn't paying attention that well. It came to about, I can't remember the year. Was it 2013 or so? I had a friend of mine. Actually, he was a former tag team partner. I wrestled in Independence and around St. Louis for a short stint. And I mean short, and it's not even worth talking about. So it was bad. I like most backyard wrestling fans, said, hey, I want to try that. I got hurt for a while, never got paid, and said, all right, I'm good. I'm done now. But he said, hey, he kept posting these pictures. And I remember he shared a photo. It was a riff on the, I believe it's right, the Abbey Road Beatles shot, and it was like Bray and the other, Rowan and Harper. I think it was just the three of them, kind of doing the Abbey Road. Am I saying is it Abbey Road? You know what I mean?
Yep.
The four Beatles.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I said, I think he had his header on like Facebook. And I said, what is this? Because I thought it was some Duck Dynasty thing. The guy was a huge Duck Dynasty. I didn't know what was going on. And he told me about it. He goes, no, it's a wrestler in his group, and explained it to me. And I said, I'm going to check it out. So I looked it up. And I want to say probably the first thing I caught was probably the vignettes they were airing to hype up their debut on, I guess, Raw at the time. And I was blown away. I think like a lot of people were. I was certainly very impressed. I really enjoyed it. It felt like that backwoods 70s horror kind of shtick. Felt like a cult thing I could kind of get. I'm a huge Cape Fear fan, so I immediately recognized the Max Cady kind of vibe. I go, that's
great movie.
And I'm slightly old enough to remember the, of course now I'm on the spot and blanking on his name, but the original riff on the Max Cady character. I can't remember, Waylon Mercy. From back when. I remember that character for a stint when I was young, when I was a kid. So I thought, this all feels very familiar. And of course, I was kind of laughing. I was teasing my friend with the whole Duck Dynasty thing, but I was like, for all my jokes, I was really into it. And I kind of pay attention after that. I kind of I would tune in and record the show just to fast forward to those segments. I'd kind of fast forward to those bits, and I'd pay attention to the rest of the show. I may not. And actually, too, I ended up finding and sharing it with Bray. We were chatting once, and I said, hey, look what I found. And it was like a post I put. I think it was like 2013, 14, somewhere in there. I put a post saying, like, man, this backwoods hillbilly cult stuff is making me a wrestling fan again. And so I started with that. And then ultimately, when I tattooed Randy Orton, that kind of made me pay attention a little bit more again, too. And it's been kind of steady ever since. But I made a post about tattooing Bray, kind of, I didn't think much of it. Like most fans, you kind of say, put something online. Never went anywhere. I ended up doing something similar with Tyler Bate. I knew that they were coming through. I can't remember don't ask me why I did that. I'm a fan of Tyler's, but I don't, why I decided to put that out there that day. I don't know. You can call it kismet. You can call it what you will. But I said, I've already tried with Bray Wyatt and tagged his name. And I said, but, he hasn't responded back. And I even put something like #shameless on it. Like, I didn't care how pandering I was being. I was just kidding around. I didn't think much of it. Almost within the next few minutes, I had a message. Bray himself had responded. And it just said something like, I can't remember what it said. I'm down. And I thought, am I reading this right? Is this a fan account? So there's a blue check mark. And so I said, okay, thinking, where's this going to go? And he's like, yeah, when can you do it? And I thought, all right, this is, it was very surreal. It was very bizarre. I had no idea that I was actually speaking directly to him. I kept trying to check the account. I'm like, yeah, there's hundreds of thousands of followers. This has to be his account. I ended up, I think, posting. I said, hey, I'll send you a direct message. I'll drop you my number. I don't know if that's better for you, if this is even serious or not. And yeah, right away, boom, responded back. Here's my number. We started texting, and that was kind of the start of it. And here we are today.
Wow, man, that's crazy. I absolutely love it. We had spoken to, we've done a few interviews with some wrestling. We did an interview with a wrestling journalist, and he kind of made mention of things like that to just, you never know. Like, and your exactly, point there too is like, you're never going to know until you give something a shot.
Right.
And yeah, oh man, that's absolutely amazing. So when did you, being that you mentioned you're a wrestling fan, when did you start watching wrestling?
I go back to, again, growing up. I had my best friend growing up, a guy named Eric, who used to go. I didn't know how wrestling worked then. We used to go to, it was like a Schnucks video rental or something. And Schnucks is a chain store around St. Louis, a big supermarket. And we used to go to their video rental place, another rental tape rentals, and you're coming across these just random boxes, and we were renting whatever was coming out, random WrestleManias and SummerSlams. They could have been 3 years old. It could have been that year. I had no idea. So I remember watching, I believe it was WrestleMania 6. Was that Hogan and Ultimate Warrior? And we were watching that, and we were arguing over who was going to win. You know, I really wish I could go back and figure out what year that was we actually watched it, because it would have been hysterical, because we were watching as if it was live. We had no idea. And this obviously predates the internet. There's no spoilers. There's no information out there. We're the only two kids we knew that liked wrestling. So, and we argued, and I said, no, I think this Ultimate Warrior is going to win, because I thought he looked ridiculous, and I was a fan of it. And he was like, no, Hogan's going to keep. I believe it was Hogan was the world champ, and Ultimate Warrior had the IC belt, and sure enough, Warrior won. So as far as I was concerned, I was a wrestling expert after that. So, and then again, like I said, it kind of stuck and kind of went, you know, I watched as a kid. I stopped watching for a good while. And then between the Attitude Era phase, and I had a friend of a friend who lived in the city, and he could get access to a lot more cable channels. And he's like, have you heard of ECW? And I said, no, I have not. So we drove out to his place, and we're watching this, you know, the early days of ECW stuff. And I thought, well, this is nuts. And so we're watching that. He goes, I watch a lot of Japanese wrestling. He was a very savant kind of guy. Very, very hipster in a way. But he had mountains of tapes, and I'd sit there and just watch old AJPW stuff, and I was blown away by that. And so from there, I think I really focused a lot on indie wrestling, and I was paying attention a lot what was going on with that. I still have a lot of it. Probably the first year of Ring of Honor tapes, I probably have those somewhere. So I always stayed as a fan, and you know, then again, like I said earlier, kind of dropped off for a bit and got back into it when I came across the Wyatt family.
Wow, that's crazy. When did you decide you wanted to wrestle?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Like I said, you know, me and all the friends did the trampoline nonsense in the backyard and whatnot. And my parents were the only parents that would allow it. Me and one other guy, we said, you know, what if we really tried to do this? So we looked into it and found there was a wrestling school. I use that term very loosely. In town. Went in. I think, you know, there was some monthly payment we owed. I think we paid 1 month, and then we never paid it again. Don't ask me why. I just never asked for it after that. And then did that, you know, trained for a bit, worked some random shows here and there, maybe once a month. And I think I did that for it was less than three calendar years. So wow. It didn't go very long, but I did, however, afford me the opportunity. I ended up working a group in St. Louis that when ECW folded, they were bringing a lot of their guys. So I got to go see a show where Nova was on. I think Nova and RVD wrestled in a small, like a high school gym in St. Louis. It was packed. So I got to see that. And by the time I was working the shows, I was backstage with in the locker room with Balls Mahoney, who was a genuine fan.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoyed the guy's stuff. And I mean, I knew he was a bit of a train wreck, but it was a blast hanging out with him, and he was making drinks and stuff for me. And, you know, I was walking around with his T-shirt on. So he's like, hey, come hang out with me. I'm like the only Mark there who's just like completely losing it, hanging out with him. And I gravitated to it. It was fun. I have some pictures and stuff. And he scribbled his phone number at the time. He's like, book me on your show. And I said, I'm not a booker, but okay. So I kept his phone number. I thought that was pretty amusing that he thought that I was somebody who show somewhere. But yeah, you know, I have a bunch of random little merchandise bits or little collector's pieces I've gotten over the years. It doesn't. If you were to come across it, you'd be like, I don't know what kind of wrestling fan this guy is. It's pretty all over the place. But
that's great. That's awesome, man.
So Kyle, what was the hardest part of training for you?
Well, at the time, I was an especially bigger guy. Fortunate to say I'm not so much anymore. However, I never took much of the cardio side of it seriously. And if anyone has ever been in a ring, or if anyone has ever even attempted to do that, you know full well that the physical demands are, I mean, it's arguable that it's at or more than even a lot of professional sports, just with the amount of constant physical trauma you do to your body, plus the ability to have your wits about you and the cardio to keep going so you can put on a show and do your best to tell a story. I basically spent 8 to 10 minutes on a show. My story was trying not to pass out. I was trying to really sell that to the fans. I'm like, look, I can not die in 8 or 10 minutes. That was my contribution to indie wrestling, I think. I was not in shape. I did not take that side of it seriously. I was, like most people, very concerned about my in-ring gear. You know, my entrance was great, but once I got in the ring, it was game over after that. So.
Oh man, fantastic. So I got to ask you another loaded question. What's your favorite ever wrestling match that you've ever seen?
Yeah, come on. There's no.
I told you it was a loaded question.
There's no way. Oh my goodness, my favorite. What? I don't know. I'd have to circle the wagons back to that one. I have no clue.
If you want to even narrow it down a little bit, what about a live match?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I'll tell you, I was there for, we all hopped, a bunch of buddies hopped in a couple cars and went up to Chicago. I want to say it was maybe Ring of Honor's first show, and what was it called? Chicago Ridge or something like that. So we got to go up there for the weekend, stay at a friend's house, and went out to go do the show. Before that night, the Ring of Honor was having their show. IWA Mid-South was having a show very nearby. And the friend I was telling you about, my friend Keith, who unfortunately he's no longer with us, but he said, hey, IWA's having it. And I knew about them thanks to him, and I knew it was a lot of deathmatch stuff. And so we got to go there. A wrestler I was a huge fan of at the time was Loki. And Loki, oddly enough, was working. I don't think he wasn't working Ring of Honor anymore at the point, but he was booked on this IWA show, and he had a match with Necro Butcher. So that was pretty ridiculous. So we got to go and see this IWA Mid-South hardcore barbed wire, blood, guts. It was disgusting. And so we're sitting there in the front row of that watching. I got to watch Loki within 5 feet of myself kick a grown man in the head. And I'll tell you, he really did it. So it was that was pretty gnarly. I got to go see ECW came to St. Louis once. And I remember the main event was a 4-on-4. It was like Carino's group. He had some kind of old Jack Victory and a few other random names in there. Maybe I'm blanking. Anyway, the other team was Dusty Rhodes, Tommy Dreamer, and a few guys. And there's a big brawl. So, all 4-on-4 is a big brawl all through the stadium and up in a town called St. Charles. And I can't remember who was fighting with Jack Victory. I'm blanking on that, but I remember I got his blood all over my arm because it came running down the boards. Essentially, we were kind of like first row at a hockey game, and then there's the floor seats. So they came down the boards, and I got Jack Victory's blood all down my clothes. So I thought that was pretty. At the time, I thought that was amazing. In 2020, that's disgusting. But it was pretty cool. There's been a handful of them. I've gotten to go to a few shows. Back when going to see the Hardy Boys at the time, and my buddy and I were 18 years old, and there was at its peak and stuff like that. I was there for Survivor Series when the Rock turned heel. And joined McMahon. So there's a smattering of them, man. I could open up the memory bank, go down for a long time on that one.
That's awesome, man. ECW shows were a riot to go to. I only ever got to see one close to where I am in a smaller arena. But if you were in the front, like couple rows, man, they would interact with everybody. Like if you'd bring stuff there, they'd actually people would rip off stop signs that were near the arena, and they would bring them in. They'd take the stop sign, they'd whack the other guy over the head with the stop sign. I'm like, oh, man. Amazing. Oh,
it's a carnival. The worst mistake I ever made actually was we were waiting in line early for the show, and everyone took off to go grab lunch, and two friends stayed behind. And when they stayed behind, they got to meet the wrestlers coming into the venue, and they stopped and said, "Can we come back to he goes, yeah, we just got our pictures taken with New Jack and Dusty Rhodes and all these people." And I thought, you're lying. And I've never been more mad in my life that I passed up meeting Dusty Rhodes in person for a Hardee's hamburger. That's the worst trade-off in the history of ever. So.
Oh man, that's awesome. So Jody, I think you've got a couple of questions for Kyle, don't you?
I do.
All right.
So obviously the segment that I'm doing on this podcast is called Abby's Window. It kind of stemmed from, being Bray fans, and he's kind of the reason I got into wrestling as well. And so you mentioned earlier about, this relationship with him kind of starting with a tattoo. What was the first tattoo that you did for him?
I've only tattooed Bray once. We were supposed
and it was
to
the one on his hand?
Yeah, correct.
So how did that kind of –
Well, that's actually a long process. The first time I was supposed to go down, we ended up not being able to make it work. We were trying to plan it. They were coming to RAW in St. Louis, and we were trying to set up something. I would tell you, I don't think it would really matter because the original idea we had was not the handpiece, actually.
Oh, okay.
But when he came to the shop that night to do the hand, I had shown him. I still had the drawings. I actually had the full stencils and everything ready to go, and I showed it to him, and he was, he was pretty psyched about it. It was a very personal tattoo. So, and I don't know that he won't get it. I just, for whatever reason, he wanted to kind of keep working on his arm. He was unhappy with a lot of the direction that one of his arm was going in, and wanted me to kind of come in and start the process of hopefully adding to it and maybe even overhauling it or whatnot. I don't quite know. And obviously it's a very, very difficult thing to kind of set up given the distance and whatnot between us. But
Yeah.
Anyway, so the piece is a very personal piece to him. So he may still get it, but we ended up not being able to do it. He was hoping to land in St. Louis by like Saturday. He was going to come out and get the work done Sunday and then do the show. But he was texting me Sunday morning and saying that he was flying in, maybe it was his brother. And he goes, we just landed in Atlanta. We got another hangout. We got about 4 hours to St. Louis. And we thought, man, there's no point in trying to hustle and come out there late night on a Sunday and do this massive piece that we had planned and then do the show, not only the next Monday night on Raw, but this was the Tuesday, so right after Raw, so Monday night, Tuesday morning, what have you. They were all hopping a plane. They were going, that was the first of what we know now as these Saudi shows. Mm-hmm. So I believe it was right before the first one they went over and did. If it had a gimmick name, I couldn't tell you what it was. But he goes, well, between that and hopping a plane, let's just not do it. So we didn't do it. And we just kind of stayed in touch and, say our hellos every now and again, up until led to, a pretty crazy text. Actually, I think it started with text. My phone just started blowing up, and I just had all these images being sent to me, and I did not know what I was looking at. None of it made sense. And then amidst these images, there was hand sketches that he was doing. There was no context to this, mind you, just photos, faces, characters, objects. And I thought, did he lose? Was he lost his mind? And then he called me, and he goes, "Oh, he texts me." He goes, "I'm gonna call you in a minute. Is that cool?" Okay.
Yeah, right.
So he calls, and I said, he goes, "Did you get all that?" And I went, "Yeah. What's going on?" And that started the process for the conversation about what we now know as The Fiend.
No kidding.
Wow.
Oh man, that's unbelievable. So you drew, so the art that we have all seen. I mean, the page of the artwork that we've seen, mm-hmm. The one that you put out there that you drew for him for the Fiend mask. Is that the first thing that you sent to him then in response to that?
Yeah, there was actually maybe a handful of about one or two other concepts where until I was able to really fine tune what he was getting at, because, you can't cradle a mind like that. And I know it seems overhyped, and I'm not trying to, toe the line or say the right thing, or I'm serious. When it comes to a mind for wrestling and creativity, I personally have never met anyone like him. So when he is sending me all these things and I'm trying to formulate a concept out of it, it was initially very difficult. I thought, I'm getting this wrong. And I'm my own worst critic. So I'm second guessing everything I'm doing. I'm like, this can't be what he wants. And I don't even know if I even sent those to him, actually. Those might have just been thrown away. But the one that now everyone has seen, I think I may have had like the penciled sketch of that. It wasn't quite finalized. I may not have had color laid into it or anything necessarily, because it was still just a sketch. I was just like, I was so afraid to send it. I thought, I don't know if he's going to like this or not, and I don't know at all the context of backstory yet. I have no idea that he's already attempted to get this done elsewhere and it wasn't working out, which I'm glad I didn't, because that amount of pressure, I would have just crumbled. But I sent him that sketch, and he popped for it, and which was just such a relief. He's very supportive, by the way. So he was extremely hyped about it, and I finished it off, and I got a good shot of it and sent it over to him. And for a while after that, it was just I'd be updated with the build, what Jason Baker was doing up at Savini Studios, and just kind of sending me the in progress stuff. And he's like, "Hey, this is what we got started so far." And I thought it was so surreal, because I actually wanted to go to Savini Studios after school. Unfortunately, I couldn't get any kind of loan program. I couldn't go. No one's going to treat Savini's makeup effects studio like a college. Nobody's going to give me a grant or anything to go to school there. And my family, and we didn't have the money to go up there. So here we are, ironically, never could make it. Always wanted to get into creature effects and design. And now here's my artwork in the background hanging up on a wall as a reference guide, while this sculptor for Savini Studios, along with Tom's guidances and however much involvement he had, and I don't know. But here it is. Here's my art inside Savini Studios being made into a mask for a pro wrestler that I've already or was a fan of. So
Wow.
Very, very surreal situation to be in, just as a fan, but also you're just trying to be a professional because this is what you do. But, you know, you realize this is not your usual customer base. So it was, that was pretty bizarre.
Wow, man.
So
That's
it
incredible.
seems like when he gets an idea in his head, he kind of goes 1,000 miles a minute. Would you say that's an accurate statement?
Absolutely. That's the most accurate thing anyone said in this interview so far. Because my oldest daughter is sitting next to me here in my living room, and she can attest to this. When he called that night, and when he was on the phone, he's not loud. He was just very excited, and his passion comes through. And he was just really, really going to town on the phone call. And I remember by the time I hung it up, both my daughter was to my left, my wife was to my right, I believe. And I remember because you could hear him across the whole living room, and just very animated, and so pretty intense. And I think the question was kind of like, what was that? And I was like, so then I had to explain what was going on, which is a strange story to tell somebody. And then you sit there and realize I have to design a mask for what is going on right now. So it was a pretty intense conversation. You know, he's a very, very intense guy. Even when he's quiet, which is just, then it's just scary. Then I don't care for it.
What did you think when you first saw The Fiend walk out?
The first time I technically saw it, he had sent me a picture. This when they were filming the vignettes for the Funhouse, because those early vignettes leading up to the debut, those was all done by, I believe Jason directed those.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're just whatever they're doing with like the blue wall. I guess that's probably just backstage at the show. I don't know. But the full set stuff was all done at Savini's. And he had sent me a picture of him in the full gear, which I didn't know. I only knew my contribution at that point. And so seeing that was pretty crazy. And then, but you know, you don't get the picture didn't do it justice, because we come back home and the vignettes are airing on TV, and I'm watching along like anyone else is. I don't know anything beyond that you guys knew. I was just a fan at home watching it. Yeah, so watching it with everyone else, I didn't quite know what was going on. I had seen the picture. I knew what he would ultimately look like. I didn't even know it was called The Fiend, I don't think, at that point. So
wow.
My wife and I were at a concert in St. Louis. Tool had come to town, and she's
nice.
She's a huge fan, so I surprised her with tickets to that. So that was pretty neat. I want to say towards the end of the show, I felt my phone buzzing in my pocket quite a bit, and Maynard's got a strict no phones out nonsense or something in the show, so I never was looking at it. So I had taken it out, and I remember the first message I think I caught was actually from a friend. Same friend who got me into Bray in the first place, who was very upset that I was doing all this. He's like, "You got to be kidding me! That's amazing! You're doing all this stuff." So
you didn't tell me.
He was very supportive, and I can't remember what his message said, but it was something to the effect of, you know, "Holy cow! That was amazing," or something. And I have no idea what he's talking about. So I'm checking through, and I'm seeing some updates and posts, and I'm seeing some other things triggered on social media, and I didn't know what was going on. So I finally checked my texts, and it's Bray. And I've said before, his only comment was, "We changed the world," or "We changed wrestling," or something like that. And again, even more of the bizarre, I thought, what is he talking about? I still have no idea. And it wasn't until I think my friend had responded back, and he might have sent me a clip of the show of that night, because the night that they debuted The Fiend on the Funhouse, that happened there. So we were in St. Louis watching the show. I wasn't even seeing it on TV at that point. So I'm learning about everything in a parking garage leaving Scott Trade Arena. And so I got to come home and kind of sit and watch the whole thing play out. And seeing it that way was amazing. Just kind of seeing it all put together. And because the picture doesn't do it justice, you don't get he's singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," and there's all these other graphics. And I thought, what did I get involved in? This was the most brilliant thing in the world. And I remember thinking, my first thought was, I hope they do this right, because that was the biggest. When I knew of what he wanted to do with that character, I think like most people, we kind of thought they're going to do that on a PG wrestling show. And but hey, and that was my same thought going into with the Lantern too. It's like, well, they're definitely not doing this, and I was proven wrong there. So it was pretty amazing.
Oh, unbelievable.
So now this is kind of just evolved over time, and I mean, as a fan, it's been amazing to watch, and seeing all your artwork that you've done for him. It's amazing. And like you, I was kind of like, they're going to do this on a PG show, but they've really, it seems like, obviously I don't know him, but it seems like they've really just kind of let him run with it. And other than that horrible Goldberg match, I mean, he's really just done what he wanted to.
I think that's very true, and I can't speculate on a lot, and anything that I would know, obviously I can't speak too much, but I will say that his ideas, you know, this is definitely still his, and I think he's been also exceptional at, if on the creative side of things, and how maybe the company wants to angle the character, and that's the one thing that he can't control, and I assume not, and again, I don't know to how far, but anything you come to understand, I don't think too many people have a lot of creative control over their characters. You know, what this your character is what you're doing, and you can have control in that. But where it goes from there, I think that gets a lot of hands involved in that one. Yeah. I think we can clearly see that due to the amazing popularity of it is why we got this Seth Rollins feud, and then the belt, and then everything up, and then I think, you know, as a fan, I'll say this honestly as anyone else, and I tell this to anybody else listening, you cornered yourself with that. You absolutely put your title on a character that this is not about belts. Yeah. This is not about championships. And you put it on this invincible monster of a character. How are you going to get it off of him?
Right.
And as soon as they put the belt on him, I thought, well, you know, good for him. As far as I was concerned, man to man, if this brings you, more lucrative stuff, if you're going to, you know, really sweep it up with merchandise, and a belt means something, and I don't know all the ins and outs of wrestling contracts, and there's so many are different, and I don't care. But if that works out for you and your family, good for you. That's all. That's why I saw it. You know, get it while you can. But again, what are you going to do when that time's up? And you know, that's personal opinion, I guess, on what people like and don't like or whatever. But I feel like, and I'm hoping, along with everyone else, that what we're going to finally be able to see now is kind of getting back to more of what it was meant to be.
Yeah, and I said that at some point in my interview, Joe, if you remember, the belt turned him into, you know, he went from being the hunter to being the hunted, and now that he doesn't have it anymore, obviously we were very happy, but now he can go back to being the hunter again.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So we've also gotten a lot of stuff from you as far as the progression is concerned. And now obviously today was absolutely off the wall. Because we got your artwork first, because we saw what looked like a chainsaw. We saw what looked like it looked like a lace almost with a little bit of blood there. We saw something look like stitches, and all I could think of, and it's funny you brought that up earlier, because all I could think of was Texas Chainsaw. I must have said Texas Chainsaw to Jeff and Jody a ton of times.
Yep.
But we got that, and now today we got a picture this morning, which I didn't even see until I woke up earlier and came. I'm like, oh my goodness. And right away we got a hold of each other and started talking about that picture that he put out today. And then we got the thing later than that from you, and it blew all of our minds. We were recording our show for the week, and all of a sudden we get this picture of that cabin. So is this something that, and again, whatever you can tell us and what you can is perfectly fine. But those kind of things, is that something that you're kind of ongoing with, like doing with him, or is this something that you're just doing, or is this some stuff that you're working on? Obviously we know you can't spoil anything, and that's, you know, so whatever you can say and what you can is totally.
I kind of want to just answer yes and just leave it at that. It's such a loaded,
Like I said, man, don't whatever you're comfortable with. I don't want to force you into something you can't talk about.
I mean, I understand. If I was me listening, I would want to know too, and I'd be just as eager and excited and whatnot. So much of it falls into a legal category.
Sure, absolutely.
I will say that it's been in for some time now. There's still things that have been, at the very least, talked about, up to designed, and whatever goes from there, I don't know. I mean, understand that when it comes to Bray, he's kind of like the sun, and anyone else who's working with this is just planets revolving his orbit. That's all we are part of something bigger, and in a lot of ways don't even know what the whole story is to all of it. So I've been involved with other aspects and things for there's things that we were doing early, you know, at the time of the Fiend mask that we've done that have not happened yet.
Wow.
And now when I use the word yet, I'm not, it's not gospel. Right. It could very well never happen. I don't know.
Sure.
But at times during conversations, and I don't pester, and I might be like, hey, you know, one time I did, you know, you think we're gonna, and I brought up what it was and whatnot, and you know, the answer was, you know, yeah, you know, it's one. It may be things that are, I would say, okay, I'll put it this way too. His creative side of it, he's running with this, whether they want him to or not, or whether anyone else. This isn't anyone going, hey, what about this? And he's like, okay, I'll get on that. This is him just holding tight to the reins of this and really pushing it as far as he can go. And even when storyline-wise or character-wise, they might have done things that are not quite what he maybe would have wanted. And again, I'm speculating, so don't quote me. But if there are things that maybe he didn't quite want, or maybe wouldn't have been what he wanted to do, what he's been a genius at is getting on his Twitter and steering the ship back to true north. You know, he manages to find a way to right a wrong or to keep it coherent so it doesn't become a jumbled mess. As an example, we all kind of remember whenever Seth Rollins showed up in the Funhouse on TV, that didn't make sense.
Right.
Why would Seth be in the Funhouse? The Funhouse, I don't think has ever been necessarily a physical landmark, or wasn't intended to be, maybe. And so when that happened, I think Bray's first comment online after that was, how did you find it? Did you die? Something almost implying like this isn't on this plane of existence. So he's found ways to kind of go, okay, let's address this. And I can speculate on others. This not coming from him. You know, there's my guesses in it too. There's avenues and other aspects of the character that he wants to do. There are other things involved in what he's doing where, you know, someone else might come in who has the say, hey, well, let's do this. And he's got to be like, oh, you know, he has to kind of counter offer or say, hey, let's go and do this instead. So it's not to say that you're wrong when I say that, you know, he's in control, but you are working for a company. And so there are going to be, with anyone, there's going to be limitations on what you can kind of get away with and what you can do. But all that said, what I can say is that anything that he's asked me to do for him has not been, to my knowledge, shot down. So if things continue with what he's wanted to do, the way that he's described them to me, I've said it for months, and it keeps holding true. It's just a little bit slower, given probably the title reign and so forth. But you really haven't seen anything yet. It's not over, not by a long shot. What his creativity and where his mind is at with it, this is something that can continue to grow and call it evolution, call it what you will, but it's not done. And he's far too creative a person for that. So there's as far as today goes, kind of bring it back to that. I was a little bit surprised too when I saw what he posted, just because we're not in constant communication necessarily. There are times when I've shared things and I've reached out and I've said, is this cool? Like, I don't want to step on, I don't want to cross a line and reveal too much or what have you. So, but it's definitely a work together thing, and just making sure that essentially it's kind of like a lot of people want to make sure that this character is elevated and that we're respecting that and putting that out there and, hopefully getting people excited. And here we are talking to you now. Obviously, you guys know he has a very devoted, very hardcore fan base. And I think that people have been nothing but supportive with this. And truly, these are the people that he wants to please, and he knows that he can with what he does. That's who he is, and his creativity is respected by a lot of people. And there's a lot more to come for sure.
That's amazing, man.
I'm so excited.
That's amazing. So was the cabin today that you put out, was that a piece of your artwork?
Yes and no. That was
okay.
That was a lot of things, actually. It was fun. If the time is appropriate in the future, we can always come back. I'd be more than happy to.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine, man.
I can't do.
I gotcha.
Won't, a little bit of both, go into a lot of that.
No, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. All I will say is that Jeff and myself and Jody like blew our minds looking at that picture. Literally for what, hour and a half, 2 hours earlier today?
At least.
Yeah. It was like 2 hours. We're sitting there after we'd finished recording the podcast for Monday, and we're just sitting there like zooming in on it and looking at all the different pieces. And I think I even said on Twitter, I was like, now they're getting us looking at rocks and shit. Come on now.
Good. It's all part of the plan.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
That's why we love Bray so much. He's the only person out there, I think, you know, especially currently, that really pushes you to think deeper into what he's doing. And I only met the man for like 3 minutes, and I can already agree with everything that you said, Kyle. Like, he's got such a beautiful mind, and he's so creative. And I got to talk to him for about 2 minutes, and I could see that in him.
Well, the character, everything he's done, the mask and all that has become a bit of a muse even to myself. You know, to me, it was just certainly a labor of love, and that I enjoyed what I was doing, but it was another job. And now it's become that sort of knee-jerk thing. If I'm sketching, if I need to kind of just start the creative process for myself, I realized I've drawn a lot of stuff Fiend related that has little to nothing to do necessarily directly with the Bray Wyatt or the Fiend character, but it's just it's something that I've enjoyed doing. There are things that I've done for fun that have been taken and used unintentionally, so it's kind of funny how that works out. But it's just become like I said, almost like a muse or like an inspirational type of thing. It's because I guess it took me a while to sort of realize that a lot of people had a hand in this, but I drew this too. You know,
yeah.
When you sit in your television and watch something come on TV, and you're seeing things blow up online, and you walk past somebody down the street and they're wearing a shirt. I remember the first time I saw somebody walking by with my drawing on the shirt, and I went, "Hey, I almost said it to myself like I was shocked. Like, what is that doing there?"
Wow.
And that's the bizarre moment. It's also, you know, he sent us to Raw. Wife and I went down and sat, you know, front row at ringside to see their show the night after doing his hand tattoo, which was nerve-wracking for me as a tattoo artist to see a man out there wrestling with a fresh tattoo. I thought, oh crap.
No.
But, here these kids come walking by with Randy Orton's shirt, which I had designed, and I remember the same thing. I was like, oh, I drew that. And then, well, you know, then to find out that, you know, the art department did a little bit extra creative licensing with my design to the point where it's almost unrecognizable. But I thought, what did you ask me to draw it for if you're going to change it that much? But,
oh boy!
But still, you know, that's it's neat, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of fun as a fan to see it. But you forget that you had a hand in that sometimes, because I'll always be a fan first. I enjoy it as much as the next person. I'm always going to sit there and be excited about something, and along with everyone else. And again, you kind of forget that. So even when he came walking down, I just saw him the night before tattooing his hand. And when he came walking down as a Fiend, and he's got holding the lantern, he's walking up to the cage, and the entrance to the cage was just 4 feet from where we were sitting. And my brain was just telling me, holy cow, this is Bray Wyatt. This is really neat. I'm seeing this character I'm a big fan of. And I'm like, you talked to him for like 8 hours last night. They don't coexist quickly. You end up kind of having to remember that. So it's, in that way, it's fun.
Man, oh man, that's unbelievable. That's such a great story. I can't even imagine. Like you said, I mean, the closest I ever got to anything like that was when I was writing for a newspaper. Oh my goodness, back in the early '90s, and you see your name in print. Oh man, that must have been amazing. Amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Mind blowing.
Wow. A pretty feeling too.
And he has a very he has a very intoxicating charm about him. So it didn't matter, you know, how nervous you were or that you couldn't put 2 and 2 together. Like, am I really standing in front of this person that I'm a fan of? Yeah. He just catches you off guard. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know, when you meet that, you know, that first night, going back a bit, so that the tattoo we couldn't make happen, he still sent me to Raw the following night. He came out at the time, he was still tagging with Matt Hardy. And they might have had the belts too. I don't quite remember if they wrestled the B team or who they worked with, but it was about 15 minutes before the show was over, and he texted me and said, "Hey, where are you sitting at?" And I kind of gave him a vague idea. I said, "I don't know. I'm sitting underneath a giant crane camera. I have no idea." And he said, "Walk along the boards." So I mean, this is Scott Traits where the Blues play. So he's like, "Walk along the boards, and you'll see a lady with a headset." So I start walking. He goes, "No, walk back and stand there. A lady will come up and start talking to you." So now I'm walking past all of these workers. There's all the electronic equipment. There's soundboards. There's all kinds of just wires and ropes and stuff. And I'm away from the fans. And I thought, I'm going to get tackled. I don't even know what I'm doing over here. And this lady walks up with a headset and clipboard. She goes, "Are you Bray's friend?" And I laughed. And I went, "Sure, I guess I'm Bray's friend." And she goes, "Well, come with me." And so we walked backstage, and Bray met me at, the curtain. And I said, "Well, I got a buddy out here. Can I grab him? Is that cool? Is that all right?" So, which is actually a lot of fun for me because I'm kind of realizing that, okay, I'm working with this guy and we're going to be doing the tattoo. And I don't know about the mask stuff yet, but I thought, well, there was at least, I could kind of dial back the fandom a tad. And I do mean a tad because it's kind of hard to kind of keep your composure. This is the first time I met the man.
Yes.
But my buddy, who was the guy that got me into being his fan, you could tell was trying so hard to be cool. And I was cracking up. He was about ready to buckle. So we were sitting there talking for a bit, and we kind of hear a lot of commotion music playing, and Bray kind of told me, he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, you guys missed the main event." Kind of laughed and went, "It's okay.
That's okay.
I'll get over it.
It's all right."
I won't lose a lot of sleep over missing the main. I can't tell you what it was that night. But so he goes, "Well, let's get out of people's way," because now a lot of workers. I mean, as soon as the show was over, as soon as TV cut and the fans started leaving, the mob of workers that started to tear down the arena and stuff is pretty impressive to see, actually. But
sure.
He said, "Hey, come with me." So we were walking along and walked past Vince McMahon, and they said hello. And I'm 5 feet from Vince, and I didn't even want to make eye contact. I'm not sure if it's legally allowed or not. And run into Braun Strowman, and
oh man,
he says, they say hello, and Bray says, he goes, "Hey man, this is the guy I was telling you about." And I went, "Are you talking about me?" So Bray goes, "Oh, the tattoos?" He goes, "Yeah, this is the guy." I was like, "So you guys are just hanging out together looking at my Instagram?" That's not the weirdest thing I've ever heard in my life. So he come over and said hello and took a picture real quick and put his hand next to my head, and it was bigger than my head. So we just kept walking, and next thing I realized, we're down in what a lot of people know was the gorilla position. We're underneath. We're the entrance of the Raw set.
oh my
And I
gosh,
thought, why are we standing here? And at this point, every which way was just other performers, wrestlers in their gear, out their gear with their bags, getting to where they're going. And I thought, Bray, I'm pretty sure we're in more people's way now than we were earlier. But I didn't want to question it. So the whole thing was kind of a trip. So that was actually the first time I actually met him. And it was just pretty quick. I mean, when it was all said and done, he goes, "I'll get you guys out of here." And took us back to where we came in originally at, and said our goodbyes, and that was it. And the whole time was just like, what just happened? And we were probably hanging out for 15 minutes, but it felt like 15 seconds.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was a trip. So by the time we actually met again in person, besides the phone calls and so forth, was when we came in for the tattoo work. And, you had that initial feeling, kind of like what you're saying a bit ago, you only had a few minutes, but you understand it's very intense.
Yes.
But then we actually sit down, it's kind of like, well, he's any other person. We're talking about family stuff and everything else. But the night dragged on. It's getting about 2 a.m. and everybody's tired. And I looked up at one point, and he's got those, whenever the Bray Wyatt character starts to kind of go dead-eyed before the Fiend kind of appears in the vignettes, that's a lookout. And it's kind of like, could you not look at me that way? Well, because it's natural. And I think that's, you hear it all the time. When these performers can go out, and whether they're playing a character, but if they can be themselves and they can love what they do, and they can, this is a huge part of who he is, just as a person. To what degree, what's true, what's been rattling around in his brain for how many years, that's all speculation, and he can confirm, deny, XYZ. But this is truly something that means a lot to him personally, which is why I think it's so honest and people can respond to it so well, because just in the dialogue was pretty amazing. We were actually talking at one point, this is one thing I'll actually share, and I hope he doesn't get mad at me for saying it. But it was just just a chat. We're kind of going over a lot of things, and he's kind of telling me, backstories and concepts and ideas over all the puppets and whatnot. And I remember when we were talking about and we know a lot of the inspiration comes from, but we're kind of chatting about that. And he was kind of telling me some other things, and we talked about so much that I can't even remember it, much less begin to even try to repeat it. And a lot of it, there were plenty of times where he would say, keep that to yourself. And I'm like, that's not a problem. I genuinely can't even remember what we talked about. So that's good. The secret's on lockdown, but I really wish I could remember what he told me. But we talked about quite a bit. And when he got to talking about Abigail, he almost legitimately got quieter and kind of looked away from me.
Wow.
That was bone chilling, because I thought, that's just a character. And I realized I do not know what that means to him. And that is one of the most genuinely, when you're one-on-one in a quiet room, 2 a.m, we had music on, but it's just a studio loft. The only real light is the lamp that we're working with. And he's sitting across from you, just like, it's pretty dark overall. And he's looking back at you, and he trails off talking about Sister Abigail. And I thought, I don't even want to ask what the hell this is about. So that was, there's so many, it was frightening. It was incredible. I thought, and naturally, I'm like, tell me, what's going on? You want to know. But it just kind of really painted a picture, I think, of where he's at creatively and how much this means to him. So that's one memory I'll never forget, is the look that he gave when he started talking about that.
Wow, man, that's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
One of my favorite interviews that he did was right before WrestleMania, when he had the WWE Championship. And it was some random radio person that he was sitting there with and talking, and they were asking about promos and things like that. And one thing that'll always stick out to me that he said, nobody can write things for me. Like, nobody else does me, because nobody else is me, and nobody can write things for me. I'm just me. And that will always stick out in my head.
Exactly.
I feel like he is very genuine, and he just does what he loves to do. And you're right. That's why we connect with him so much.
Yeah, I don't think I'm sure there's probably a direction, but I don't even think there's really much. He's not the type of person to kind of write it down. I think probably so much of those promos and those deliveries is there's a certain, there's a point he's trying to get to. He knows that, I'm sure, but beyond that, I think it's off the top of the head, and that's what's incredible about it. And it's so fun to watch. Is just, it's acting. It's like it's a stage play. It's freelance. This is pretty brilliant. I mean, again, I gotta, sometimes I'll sit here and I'll kind of be like, oh, it's so amazing. It's so amazing. It sounds like I'm just, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I'm genuinely being honest with you when I say that it's impressive to see. And that's, it makes it very easy to work with somebody like that, because that person then makes you just as creative.
Unreal.
Me personally.
Well, listen, sir, we can keep you here all night. We're all fans, and you've been with us a long time. We really, really appreciate. First of all, I do have a couple of things. One of the things, we do have a community member. His name's Rusty. He was talking to us the other night, and he said, listen, if you guys ever happen to get in touch with him somehow, he said, tell him I will fly out to him to get his artwork done. So. And he said, money is no object. And with this guy, I don't think it is, because he donates a lot to Daze's channel. But can you just leave us with where people can find you, where, obviously now with the times we're in, we know, what's going on out there. Right. Obviously down the road, but where can people find you if they are interested in doing something like that? And where can they locate you on social media as well to get in touch?
Yeah, well, my shop is the Washington Tattoo Collective. It's myself and a handful of other fantastic artists. It's a studio that I opened with a partner in 2013. It's in Washington, Missouri. It sits right on the Missouri River, just about an hour west, maybe a little bit less of city of St. Louis. So it's not very far away at all. As far as social media goes, most prominently is Instagram. You can find me on there at Scarborough Tattoo. Email is the same as far as any booking process for anybody. If I can, be more than happy to, whether it be commissions or obviously tattoo work or illustration work, scarboroughtattoo@gmail.com. I believe I have a scarboroughtattoo.com, but I don't think anybody uses the .com stuff anymore, so I'm not sure if that's remote. But yeah, pretty easy. I try to keep my messaging hopefully as close to just email inbox as possible. Yeah, unfortunately, man, with everything going on in the world right now, I've been home with my family and children, and haven't really been focusing on that stuff too much as of now, which
Right.
which is why I didn't get the initial email. Apologize for that.
No, it's all good.
Yeah,
All
pretty
good.
easy. You know, and I do try my best to check the messages and stuff like that. I know people leave comments and whatnot. I try to keep heads or tails, but I don't even waste my time with Twitter. People, all it takes is Bray posting something and my phone doesn't stop.
Oh man, I'd imagine. I feel sorry for you. I would absolutely imagine you're getting inundated.
It's humbling, and I know one day it can all end. And I'm a fan who I feel like I got lucky, and I'm glad that, you know, glad to be a part of it, and I'm glad people enjoy it so much. But you know, yeah, sometimes it's like, you know, I try to remind myself that, but you know, you gotta mute the phone sometimes because it's.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the power of someone in his position, I guess.
Absolutely.
And
Well,
Kyle, you are definitely on my bucket list as well too. I got to come out there and visit you and get you to do my next piece of ink.
Be my pleasure.
Oh man, listen, it has been an absolute pleasure. I loved it. Oh, it was great, awesome to hear, and we will definitely take you up on your offer, man. Somewhere down the road, when all this is come and gone and the things that are happen, we'd love to have you back, because this has been a wonderful insight into everything, and it was just a pleasure for myself. And I can't thank you enough for coming on. I'm sure Jody and Jeff are the same.
Yes, you gotta. You need to bring Bray with you next time.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, sure.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate your time, and man, I you know, stay safe in all this stuff with your family, and I hope to talk to you again sometime.
Yeah, y'all stay safe as well, for sure. Be in touch.
All right, sir.
You have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle.